In this video, we're going to learn how to name ternary ionic compounds. So here we go, ternary ionic compounds. A ternary ionic compound is a compound that has more than two elements in it. It's really an ionic compound that has a polyatomic ion. So ionic compound, well, it's made up of a metal plus a polyatomic ion. Polyatomic ions are those ions that are made up of multiple atoms. So for example, you might have this over here, CO3, 2-. So it's a carbon and 3 oxygens connected together, and it has a charge of 2- overall. And this one is named carbonate. And you can actually see that in your reference tables. This is known as carbonate. Another example is NO3-. And if you don't have a 1 there, that means -1. And this one here is nitrate. So if you don't know these off the top of your head, you can use your reference table to see what the names of these polyatomic ions are. By themselves, the ions are not considered compounds because they have an overall charge. To really be a compound, you need to make sure they're connected to a metal. So a full example of a ternary ionic compound might be Na2CO3. I know this is a ternary ionic compound because it's a metal and a polyatomic ion, whereas a binary ionic compound would have simply been a metal and a regular nonmetal, just two different elements. So for example, that would have been NaCl, one metal, one nonmetal. Done. No polyatomic ions there. Another example of a ternary ionic compound might be NaClO3, metal, polyatomic ion. To name these, you just need to name your metal and then your polyatomic ion. So Na2CO3, the metal is sodium. The polyatomic ion is CO3 2-. You don't see the charge there because you have it combined with sodium right now, but we know it's CO3, so that makes it carbonate, sodium carbonate. And you don't change the ending of the polyatomic ions, you leave them as they are. So just name what you see, sodium carbonate. Over here, our metal is sodium. Our polyatomic ion is ClO3. And if you're not sure, if you don't remember the names, you can go into your reference table, find ClO3, and you'll see that that is chlorate. Chlorate. So we have sodium chlorate. Let's try another example here. So we'll do AlNO3. So notice that it is a ternary ionic compound because we have a metal and a polyatomic ion. So we'll name our metal first without changing anything. That's aluminum. The polyatomic ion is NO3, as we see over here. NO3 is nitrate, so it's aluminum nitrate. Aluminum nitrate. Let's try another example that's similar to this, but you have to look carefully at this one here. So we'll do very similar to what we had above there. This is a ternary ionic compound because we have a metal and a polyatomic ion. But be careful here. This is NO2, not NO3. There's a difference there. Yes, there's a 3 on the outside, but that just means there's 3 of these. We're looking at what's on the inside of the bracket over here. That's what counts. So the NO2, what is that? If you look in your chart, you'll see it's actually nitrite. So this is aluminum, nitrite. So that's a ternary ionic compound with the polyatomic ion nitrite in there instead of nitrate. So they all sound very similar to each other, but those subtle differences make entirely different compounds. Nitrate has NO3, nitrite has NO2. And this is not polyatomic, but just to show you the difference, if we have AlN, this I know is not a ternary ionic compound because there's no polyatomic ion in there. It's just two different elements, a metal and a nonmetal. This is a regular binary ionic compound. Aluminum. And when you name this, the nitrogen becomes nitride. But this is not ternary. It is binary. We'll do a few more together to make sure you understand. So let's try this one here. First of all, when you are given a question, you need to ask yourself, is it ionic? And if it's ionic, is it binary or is it ternary? In this case, you'll notice that it is ionic because there's a metal. And you'll notice that it's not binary because it's not just two elements. It's more than two elements. There's a metal and a polyatomic in there. So we just write out the name of the metal, which is magnesium. And then we write the name of the polyatomic ion, which if you look in your reference table, SO4 is sulfate. Magnesium sulfate. Let's try another one. So this is Li2. Let's make it Li3 PO3. So you'll notice this is an ionic compound because you have a metal in there. You'll notice it's ternary because you have a polyatomic ion. So just write the name of the metal, which is lithium, and then the name of the polyatomic ion. If you don't remember this, go to your reference chart. You'll see it's PO3, not PO4. If you look at PO4, you'll put phosphate by accident. This is PO3 with a 3 at the bottom, and that's lithium phosphite, ITE, instead of ATE. We'll do one more. So here we have Ca3 PO4 2. So you'll notice we have a ternary ionic compound because we have a metal and a polyatomic ion. So our metal is calcium. Polyatomic ion, look at what's inside the bracket here, PO4. Not PO2, but PO4. And if you look in your chart, your reference table, that's phosphate. Calcium phosphate. So in this video, you learned how to identify and how to name ternary ionic compounds, which are ionic compounds with a metal and a polyatomic ion. If you haven't memorized your polyatomic ions, use your reference table to find the names when you're naming the ternary ionic compounds.